Olá a todos, bem-vindos a mais uma conversa da Look Mag. Hoje tenho o enorme prazer de receber Kam Lee, exatamente, da banda norte-americana Massacre. É um prazer enorme tê-lo aqui connosco, sendo que ele vai estar em Lisboa muito brevemente num festival que se chama LX Extreme Summer Invasion. Mas sobre isso vamos falar mais à frente. Para já, Cam, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and welcome to our talks. I'm very happy to have you here.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Let's go back to 1984 when the band was initially formed. You joined them to replace the vocalist at the time. Several years later, how did that happen?
Well, actually, I was in people that don't know. I was in Mantis, which was precursor to Death, and I was also in Death. And I left Death in actually it was 85, so it would have been 1985. The band Massacre started in 84. I was in I joined Massacre in November of 1984. I left Death in September of 85, I should say, and I joined Massacre at the end of 85 in November of 1985. I basically had moved from Altamont Springs, Florida, where Death was located,
Yeah.
to live with my aunt and uncle at the time, who had lived in Tampa or Sefner, Florida. It's kind of like a suburb. And while I was living there, I got a job at a convenience store, and I remember a guy came in to buy beer, and he was underaged, and it was Alan West. And Alan West was the the guitar player at the time for Massacre. And he recognized me and we started talking. And he said, first he was like surprised I was working at the store. He's like, what are you doing here? I said, I live here now. I'm working here. He's like, I have a band. You want to come check us out? And I said, sure, no problem. And he gave me directions to where they rehearsed. And I remember it was kind of like a recruiting. I didn't realize at the time, but he was recruiting me. Yeah, he was like asking me to come out and check them out, and I remember he gave me directions, and it was old school. This was before the internet, before you could use Google Maps. Everything was written on a piece of paper with hand drawn and ink pen, like the roads and everything, just like an old school map. So I took this map, and it took me, because it was not very well, drawn out and written. It took me 2 hours to get there.
2 hours?
Because I was literally on a skateboard, and it was supposed to be only 30 minutes away, but it actually took me 2 hours because...
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I remember getting there, and Alan didn't show up. And I met Billy Andrews, the drummer, and Mike Borders, who was the bassist at the time. And we waited around for a couple hours. I talked to those guys. We waited around, and Alan ended up not showing up. And they were like, well, we didn't want you to come out here for no reason. We can, let's run through a song together and show you what we can do. So they ran through, at the time, they were only a cover band. They didn't have any originals. And they ran through just bass and drums through a cover of Piranha from Exodus. And I remember I knew the song, so there was no PA, and they started playing the song, and I knew the lyrics, so the time it came up, I started just yelling the lyrics, and they thought it was great. They're like, oh, we can't believe we could hear you over the drums and bass. And I'm like, yeah, and they're like, well, we were trying to see if you would want to be our singer. Do you want to be our singer? And I'm like, sure, why not?
Why not? That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Give me some, just what to kill my curiosity. Did you enjoy the time you were with Death? Do you have good
Yes.
memories?
Yes, I did. Of course I did. We were young. We were teenagers. I knew we were doing something special, but, as teenagers, especially boys, you get to that. And the whole reason everything happened, there's so many different stories of things, but come on, we were teenage boys. We were only 16 years old. And the truth was, what really got us in trouble was our penises. That's
Usually is, Cam. Usually is.
That's all. It was over. We had arguments over girls, and that's literally what the truth was. Like my falling out with Chuck was literally over a girl.
That's wonderful.
Yep.
End of story.
Yeah.
It was a girl. End of story.
Yep.
Let's go back to Massacre. I read something that you went to buy Iron Maiden Killers and Mob Rules from Sabbath, and that changed your life. You really like those records. Is this true?
Yeah. Well, actually, what it was Freddie Rick brought Iron Maiden Killers to school because back in the 80s, kids that were in the music and metal would bring their records to school because we had a break time. There was a time you could have, they usually gave you a break, half an hour, that you could have like a downtime. And some guys would bring in records that they could play because they were allowed to play it. And I remember he brought in Killers at the time. I was a really big punk fan, but I liked really aggressive punk. I was getting into the Misfits, and I really loved the Plasmatics. They were like one of my favorite bands. And I remember he brought in Killers, and the first thing he asked me, because we were in art class, he says, "Can you draw this?" And he slid the Killers album cover over to me, which was, he wanted me to draw Eddie. And I was like, oh yeah, I could draw that. So I drew Eddie, and then we just started talking and hanging out from that point, and he played it for me. And at the time, I hadn't heard anything like that. Like I said, I was coming from a very skate punk side of things. I heard some skate punk and hardcore, but I hadn't really heard anything like metal. And I remember, I believe it's either on Killers or the very first Iron Maiden album. Either one, I remember the drums coming in on one of the songs was just really, really kick ass. I just remember that drum intro, and it was just like really stuck with me. And so I kind of started graduating to metal after hearing that. And then I got introduced to other things because a friend of mine at the time that was in school was tape trading. And he was from New York City. So he had more access to a lot of stuff. And I remember hearing tapes that he was basically tape trading. And so I heard Except for the first time. And when I heard Fast as a Shark, I was blown away. It's like at the time, no one ever heard double bass drums like that. I mean, most popular thing I think may have been Motley Crue, but nobody had double bass like Fast as a Shark. And when that song came in, it was just like
mind blowing.
Yeah, mind blowing. And then there was bands like Exciter. I mean, Heavy Metal Maniac was just insane. And then the fact that you find out that Dan Beeler is not only the singer, he's the drummer as well. Then you're like, what? And then Raven and Riot. There was a lot of Canadian metal at the time just coming out at that time, and it was a good time to be a metal fan because it was at the dawn of everything. It was the dawn of especially underground metal. It was the dawn of underground metal. We were just coming out of the new wave of British heavy metal, and it was just booming that, and then thrash was coming out, and then you got to hear thrash from, of course, California. But what blew me away was German thrash. The first time I heard Destruction, the first time I heard Sodom, I was just like, what? This is great.
This is great. A new world was open to you.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell me one thing. When you joined Massacre, they were a little bit thrash metal and heavy metal band. So as far as I know, but then when you joined them, it became more death metal band. What led to that change? It was by you entering the band?
Yeah, it was pretty much me because I was very proud of death metal. I was proud of what we started in Mantis and then became Death. And I wanted to continue that. I didn't want it to change. And other bands at the time were kind of experimenting with death metal. Morbid Angel, especially. You had Hell Witch down in South Florida. So we knew that death metal was kind of being this new territory, this new area to go in. And it fit me perfectly because I love horror. And I thought, wow, this is a really good extension of taking the stuff that I love, the genre of movies that I like and the kind of the books I'm reading, and I'm able to expand it in a music. So I told them when we got into the first thing I said is like, look, if I'm going to join this band, the first thing you got to do is we got to be a death metal band. We can't be just a thrash band. It's got to be death metal.
What did they say to you?
They were like, okay, cool. They were like, that's great. That's what we wanted. Because I think because they were kind of a cover band and they did have a more melodic singer.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to go heavier. I know that's what Mike Borders wanted to do for sure, because he was the one that initiated. He was the one that said, yeah, we've got to go heavier. We've got to be heavier. And then Alan West, the riffs that he wrote were very Celtic Frost type riffs. And I was like, that was my wheelhouse. I was like, I loved Hellhammer. I loved Celtic Frost because it was just so raw and dirty. I liked Venom. Don't get me wrong. Venom was great. It was an introductory. But once I started hearing more of the underground stuff in the demos, like Hellhammer and just stuff like that, and like I said, the German thrash stuff, Creator was called Tormentor back then. And when I heard that, and then, of course, Sarcophago from Brazil, I was like, this is what we got to do. We got to be more raw. We've got to be more extreme.
Cam, you have a very impressive vocal style. I have to ask you this. How did the death growl come into your voice? You were the creation of that. You create that.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because when I started in Mantis, because we were emulating Venom, I was more kind of like doing a more screechy Cronus type thing at the beginning. But I was also young. I was a teenager. My voice hadn't developed yet. I hadn't dropped. My balls hadn't dropped, I guess. So I had more of a high-pitched, screechy voice.
Yeah.
But I remember when I went to Massacre, I was playing drums in Mantis and Death. I was playing drums and doing vocals, kind of like Dan Beeler. And then I said, I don't want to just be behind the drum kit. I want to be out front. And I felt that if I could stand up and be able to stretch my diaphragm, I could do more vocally and have more of an attack. But I also thought about at the time, because everybody was kind of like at this screechy vocal type style. Because, Possessed and stuff like that, and what even Chuck was doing.
Yeah.
I wanted to be different. And I remember what terrifies me, what scares me, what makes the hairs on the back of my neck and on my arm raise up. And I was around a lot of, my mother raised dogs, pit bulls and Rottweilers for the puppies. And I remember as a 14 and 15-year-old kid, my mom would go feed the dogs. And I'm like, I got to? Do I have to? And I'd take out a bowl of, dog food, and there's 5 or 6 Rottweilers and pit bulls around you. And I don't know if you've ever seen hungry dogs, but when you lay down food and they're fighting over the food and you're stuck in between them and all of a sudden they're growling, I thought that's the most, hair-raising sound, that growl. That and I was like, that's what I want to do with my vocals. I want to bring that type of aesthetic to vocals to kind of give you that feeling of something that's going to, raise the hair on the back of your neck.
That's so cool. That's so cool. It was hard for you to elaborate the style?
Yeah, at first. Very, very, very hard. Because, I remember, you got to remember, this is 1985.
Exactly.
Everyone made fun of me.
I imagine so.
Everyone said, that is shit vocals. What are you doing? You sound retarded. You sound like an idiot. That's never going to last. And look at it. It's 40 years later, and it's pretty much the key to metal now.
Exactly. That's wonderful. Looking back and see all the changes and the evolution and what they joke before. It's a kind of an icon, because you are an icon in your voice, and the death growl is an icon. Do you remember when you read your first book of Lovecraft?
Yeah, I was 12 years old, and I read a short story, because there used to be a magazine called Weird Tales, and I used to collect a lot of very strange magazines because I loved horror. So I'd get famous monsters of Hollywood and all this stuff. And I remember going into, I guess, a collection store back in the day that had a lot of these old magazines and stuff. And I picked up this one, and I think it was because the cover was really unique, the artwork on the cover. And it had all these short stories in it. And one of them was The Outsider from H.P. Lovecraft. And I read that in one sitting and was completely blown away. Wow, here's a guy, and this is the first story, so I didn't know anything else about anything else, but I just read that story and I was like, this is a guy that knows what isolation and being alone feels like. Because in that story happens to be about a person or a being that has grown up alone and doesn't know any better until it gets out. And at the end of the story, it sees itself in the mirror and realizes it's not human. And at first it's scared of itself because it's looking at its reflection, and it's scared of its reflection because it thinks it's human, but then it's not. And I always kind of gravitated towards that, feeling kind of like an outsider myself. And I was like, wow, I really resonated to this story. And that was always my favorite. And I always go back to that because it's the first Lovecraft story I wrote. I read.
You are really fascinated about the universe of Lovecraft, right?
Yeah, I am. I kind of relate to it because I see how Lovecraft looked at it like us as human beings aren't very important in the vast universe. We're just kind of like specks of dust. And
yes.
I view that myself. I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in God and any kind of religion or any of the pantheon of gods or the devil. But I do believe that we are part of a universe, and we're part of a larger, vast thing that we couldn't even, we have, as human beings, we have no concept to it. It's like comparing us to a microorganism. Yeah, there's just that's how vast the universe is. And I kind of gravitated to Lovecraft because of that.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. Today, looking at the old school death metal scene, how do you describe it?
I like the old school death metal scene. It's kind of weird because coming from there, being in it for 40 years, I've seen all different sides of it. It's weird. It's gone through transitions. It almost died. I remember in the 90s when death metal was almost gone, that nobody was listening to it anymore. Black metal was the new thing, even though it wasn't the new thing. But everyone was going to listen to black metal, and all of a sudden, symphonic black metal just came out of nowhere, and every death metal was just kind of like. And I kind of enjoyed that time because I had been out of death metal since '94, and kind of seeing it go through where going back to being underground was kind of refreshing to me. I liked it. That fact that it was going back to being underground and being less liked, because that's where I always thought it should exist. It shouldn't have gotten as popular as it did. But so it's gone on a wave. It started off here, and then it's gone way up, and then it crashed back down, and now it's kind of back up there now because now everything is all this retro nostalgic. Death metal kind of stuff, which is good in some ways, in some senses, but it's coming from the old school. It's kind of it's not the same. It's
not the same.
But yeah,
because you live that time, you live the beginning, you saw everything happen, and you are one of the main characters of that born new style, shall we say, like this. So It's different for you. Have you ever imagined that you would be singing still death metal in 2025?
No, I thought we'd all be dead by now. I thought the world would have blown up. I got Hollywood lied to me, and I'm upset because I was told in the 80s that we'd be living in a wasteland and driving hot rods around, fighting bikers, looking for water and food out of dog cans. I mean,
they all lied to us.
Yeah, it's either that or I expected kind of robots to take over, which I guess maybe that's going to happen soon, but. The whole Terminator.
Yeah.
I keep waiting for Skynet to kick off, but.
And when you look to the metal scene today, and you see these new death metal bands, how do you see them? Do you think they are good? They are reaching out for something new, or no?
It's weird because, like I said, death metal's gone through so many different changes, and there's so many different subgenres of it now. It's confusing. I don't want to be a hater. I don't want to be a gatekeeper, but sometimes I think you have to be to a certain extent. It's weird because I come from a Gen X generation, so we have our divisions and we're proud of them, and then you have the younger generations that kind of will laugh at you and say, "Oh, old man, shut up. Stop yelling at the clouds. We want to be open-minded." And I'm like, look, open-minded is great, It's awesome, and it's nice to like, like different things. And I use food analogies a lot. So it's good to like sushi, it's good to like pizza, it's good to like Chinese food, it's good to like ice cream, but you don't want to mix it all together because
That's not
that's when
good.
it yeah, that's when it becomes kind of like shit. And that's the problem is a lot of the metal all these younger guys have different, influences, not just metal, but there's rap influences
Yeah.
and there's all these other influences, and they try to mix it. And I understand it, and I can appreciate it because that's what they grew up with. But sometimes it's just shit. It's just like I'm not trying to be cruel, but it's just like that's why we have divisions because
It's too much open-minded.
yeah, it's too much. It's too much sometimes. It's good when some bands do stick to a certain style or a tradition. I don't like to say style. Style is kind of a bad. I like to say tradition
Yeah.
because I think Massacre is a traditional band. We stay to a certain tradition, and that's that old school formula. We stay very simple. I call them caveman riffs. So we have like easy caveman riffs, and we stick to a simple formula. And that's what I've always liked about death metal because when it was raw and just easy and kind of catchy and an easy caveman riffs, that's what I liked about it. When it gets too technical, if I have to sit down and do a math equation just to understand what the music I'm listening to, you lose me.
You lose me all over the place. Let's go. In 2024, last year, you released an album, Necrolution. Can we say this is the album that will bring this new kind of reincarnation of Massacre to the metal scene again?
Well, I was hoping that Resurgence, the album before that, could have kind of done that. That's hence the name Resurgence.
Yeah.
What we did with Necrolution was I knew that I didn't want to do another Resurgence because the band members at the time, which was my recording guys, they did give me another album and right after Resurgence, and it was too similar. And I said to them, I said, "This is good music, but it's too much of the same." And a lot of those songs we end up using for a lot of the singles that we released, Evil Dead Rise and the Tripocalypse single. We released all these singles. And I told him, I said, look, I want to do something different with Necrolution. I didn't know what Necrolution, that was the last thing that came. The name came last. We didn't even have a name.
Yeah,
I said, for the new album, I want to do something.
what do you mean with this name? Sorry to interrupt.
Actually, the name came about with when I was speaking to the artist. When I
Ah.
was talking to the artist doing the album cover,
Okay.
we kind of came up with a name together because I didn't have a name for it. And I was like, he was like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And I was like, well, I was explaining how the artist said, I want there to be sort of like these skeletons, but almost like they're meshed together, like they're evolving. And he's like, okay, so you want the skeletons to kind of like be kind of like almost like morphing together. And I said, yeah, sort of like an evolution. And then he says, oh, you mean like a necrolution? I said, dude, that's the name of the album cover. I mean, that's the name of the album.
That's
Is it.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that is so awesome. And that's how we came about it. It was just talking together. And he was like, just joking. He said, like, you mean like a necrolution? I'm like, that's a great name. We should use that. And that's how it came about.
And when the album was finished, when you hear everything, when you heard everything, all the songs, were you happy with the final result? You thought this is exactly what I wanted the album to sound like.
Well, I mean, I went through different stages because I was self-doubting. I'll
You
admit on
self-doubting.
Necrolution I had a lot of self-doubt because I was scratching my head and I was thinking either people are going to hate it or they're going to
We're
love
gonna
it.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, because what I tried to do with this specific album, and it's very important, I want people to know this, because a lot of people will listen to it and they go, oh, it sounds dated. That was the point. When we did Necrolution, when I created it, I told the guys, I want the album to sound like an album that would have came out in 1988.
1984.
Like a missing album that somebody found
Yep.
on a shelf somewhere and said, hey, this is from 1988. What is this? I purposely wanted it to sound like 88, 89 type of death metal.
Cam, can you tell me during the elaboration and all the process of making the album, there was some nostalgia?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. That was like everything I was looking back during the time that we wrote it. I specifically told the members, listen to the albums from
That time.
1985 to 1989, and don't listen to anything else.
Yeah. And they did that,
Yeah,
and the result was fine.
yeah, I think so. I think that's what we came out with. We came with something that kind of sounds like it came out in the 80s, early 90s, 80s, and that's what I was really pushing for.
And why did you choose this path? Why didn't you choose something more modern?
I think my main reason was I felt that Massacre missed its early years.
Okay.
And I felt that after, because we were together in 85, 86, and in 87, everyone jumped ship to join Death and do Leprosy.
Yeah.
And I was kind of left alone. And I kind of struggled with that for a couple of years. And then everybody got fired or kicked out of Death, and they all came back and did Massacre with me. But by the time we did From Beyond, those songs were already 5 or 6 years old because a lot of them were written in 85 and 86. We didn't get the album out till 91. And I felt, okay, this is fun and all, but these songs are old to me. And I really missed the opportunity to do a proper follow-up second album. Even though I looked at Resurgence as a follow-up to From Beyond, I wanted to do that album that I missed doing in the 80s.
That's cool. That's so cool. It's kind of an homage to the early time of the band.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It was easy making the album, all the process of doing it.
Actually, no. Yeah, it was actually it was more difficult to do this album than it was to do Resurgence, because Resurgence was really simple. It came together very well because Roga and Johnny, the writers on that album, are huge fans of Massacre. So they knew right away the style to do. They emulated the style so well of From Beyond and took that over. But this one was a lot of like, oh, that's not good enough. Let's do this again. Oh, that's kind of like there was a lot of back and forth where a lot of material was kind of tossed out or changed or so a lot of it was like, you're not quite getting it just yet. And it wasn't any arguments. It was like, okay, well, what do you need? What do you expect? And I'm like, maybe a little bit of this and that. And I was giving them stuff that wasn't death metal. I was giving them stuff that was kind of like thrash or kind of like early kind of metal to listen to. And they were like, wow, I didn't think that you would want to listen to something like that. And I'm like, yeah, let's go with that kind of flow.
Did you felt some kind of more responsibility with this album because you wanted to make it, I'm going to say perfect, but so near to the sound that you made in the 80s, it was more difficult for you because of that also?
Yeah, I think so, because that was the one thing, especially now, because everything is digital. Everything obviously was recorded digitally.
That's
you can't get the analog sound that I wish you could. I wish we could go gone and record. I tell people today, I would be happy recording an album on a boombox. That's simple. Just not to get that raw sound, but you just have that natural, real sound.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard digitally, and especially how we do it, because we file share, because two of the guys live in Sweden, and then, two of us are here in the United States, and our drummer that we had on this album lived in the UK. So a lot of file sharing, but in a way, it's easy when you file share, but it's also difficult because you can't really get that sound that you really, really want. But this one, I think, was, I say, more difficult, not in the fact that way it was recorded, but more difficult for the fact that there was a lot of back and forth where the guitar players would have parts together, and then I would send it to Mike Borders to put the bass. He put the bass, and then I'd say, it's not flowing together. We got to put the drums in this part. And so with a lot of it was explaining to the drummer, I know you want to, it was okay to have a little bit of blast, but I was like, I know you want to blast here and do that, but that's not really how they played in 1980. Maybe kind of pull yourself back a little. I had to kind of, yeah.
Slow down.
Exactly.
In the record you have I suppose 3 songs dedicated to Stuart Gordon, the director that brought Lovecraft to the cinema in the 80s. can we consider this a tribute to the director and to Lovecraft also?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was wanting to do. I did prior to this album, we did an EP called Tripocalypse, which all the songs on that are all based on John Carpenter. And I had so much fun doing that. And because that was actually a lot of the material of that was the album prior. And we took the best stuff off that. And I said, I really want to do a John Carpenter album. And it came out so well that when we started to write Necrolution, I said, I want to do that again, but I'm going to do it in like a little spot. And we were talking and we're like, okay, well, what are we going to do? I said, I loved Stuart Gordon. He brought, H.P. Lovecraft to the screen. He made people in the modern times realize who H.P. Lovecraft was, because there are a lot of people, they never knew who Lovecraft was until they saw Reanimator, until they saw From Beyond, until they saw this. And I said, I'm going to pick my first 3 favorite films that he did. And a lot of people said, well, how come you didn't do Dagon? I'm like, well, Dagon was later. The 3 that he did right in a row was he did Reanimator, then he did From Beyond, and right after that, he did Castle Freak. And the really cool thing about those 3 films, not only were they Stuart Gordon directed all 3, was it also starred the same 2 people, which was Barbara Crampton and Jeffrey Combs. All 3 of those films have those 2 actors all through it. So it's kind of like a dedication to Stuart Gordon. It's a dedication to Barbara Crampton. It's a dedication to Jeffrey Combs.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. A kind of a dedication to a specific time of cinema, right?
Yes.
That's
exactly.
important. Yeah, that's important too. There are 16 themes on the record. Three of them, I think, are the prologue, I suppose. Which song do you like the best?
The song I like the best is I've always tried to do something with Massacre's albums. And I've always tried to have, which we didn't do on From Beyond. I missed it on From Beyond, and I missed it. But I've always liked to have a something based on Evil Dead, that's also a franchise I love. So my favorite song on the new Necrolution album was The Things That Were and Shall Be Again, because it's based on Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2 to be more specific. And so I was really proud of that. So I'm proud of a lot of stuff on that, but I really like that. We haven't played it live yet, but we're going to be working on that, possibly playing that live coming up in the new live set. So
that's nice. Meanwhile, you did release a mermaid in a manhole, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about this song, because I think you are going to release a few more, right?
Yeah. Well, we had this actually came from the Necrolution session.
Yeah.
We had more songs for Necrolution. Actually, even though there were 16 songs on the album, there was 4 that we took off because we were talking to the label and they were like, man, this is going to be a really long album. It might end up being a double album. And I was like, well, that's cool. And they were like, oh no, that's going to be too costly. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, not so costly for them, but more costly for the fans, because they said, yeah, then you get the double albums. If people want vinyl, it becomes heavier. It's the cost in the mail. I said, okay. So what do you want me to do? They're like, can you cut it off? So I said, okay. I sat back and I said, we're going to have to figure out what songs to cut off. And I was like, I ended up realizing we got to remove an entire chapter. And that's what the prologues were. The prologues were basically kind of like to show you that there was 4 chapters in Necrolution. Okay. And because we had to cut it the way we cut it, some stuff got shifted around. One of the prologues ended up being the second song rather than the first song, because everything got shifted. So I said, okay, we can't have the intros because it was supposed to be 4 parts. So we just took out the entire 4th part and we left the last song, which was the last song on the album. But we said, okay, I've got to take out the intro or the prologue and then 4 songs. And we ended up doing that, but we ended up using one of those 4 songs, which is based off of Lucio Fulci, 7 Doors of Death, which is also the Beyond. And we put that on the slipcover version of the album, but I also released it as a hidden track on... because I like to do things like that. I felt the track was too good to just not have it somewhere. So on the Mermaid in the Manhole CD that just came out, it's
Yeah.
a hidden track on that.
Oh,
So all 4 songs are there.
all
The
four
fourth
songs are there.
chapter four of Necrolution is actually Mermaid in the Manhole single. So
Oh, that's cool. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. You are coming to Lisbon on the on next July in a new festival. Um, Before of that, let me ask you, how do you prepare for a gig? Do you have special care to take special care with your voice?
um I do I actually drink tea with honey and
Oh,
lemon. Um I usually do that. I bring that on the road with me. So I have tea with honey and also use Ricoli. Yeah, the Ricoli cough drop. Yeah, I use those. Especially the honey one. I love those. So I'll chew on a couple of those, or suck on a couple of those before we go on. Have my tea and honey and lemon and before and after, and I'm good after that.
are you good after that? You're ready
Hmm.
to growl a lot.
Yep.
What can you expect from this concert that you are providing us in Lisbon next summer?
Well, for one thing, this is the first time, at least I don't know if because there was a Massacre version without me. I don't believe we've ever been to Lisbon.
Hmm.
And since I know the fans really love From Beyond, I decided this tour we're going to extend what we started last year. And last year we started doing, which was funny because we were supposed to do the 30th anniversary of From Beyond. Unfortunately, the world shut down,
Exactly.
and it yeah we had COVID everywhere, so we couldn't do the 30th anniversary of From Beyond because that would have been 2021. But during 2021, we were right in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
So we had to push it back. We were going to do, oh, maybe we can't do the 30th, when we will do the 31st. 2022 came around. Still couldn't do it. 2023 finally came around. We're like, wow, we can do it. Now it's 33 years. So we're going to do the 33 years of anniversary of From Beyond. It's 2 more years later, and there's parts of the world that we haven't been to yet.
Yeah.
And, of course, Lisbon is one of them. So I was like, let's bring it one more time out on tour. Let's bring From Beyond to those fans who haven't seen it. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I've been doing this stuff for 40 years, so it's like, oh, I got to play these songs again? Really? But as my wife said, give these fans who have never seen you something that they'll remember you by, because that's what they love. That's why they got into Massacre. They deserve to hear that. And she's right. And I was like, you know what? You're
Absolutely.
right. I'm going to go to places this year that we've never been before, and those fans deserve that. So that's what you're going to get, and that's what a
That,
majority of people are going to get. Because, like I said, this time we're going to places we've never been before.
that's wonderful. I think your wife is absolutely right. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Cam, thank you so much for being here. It was a
Okay.
great, enormous pleasure to talk to you, and I hope to see you in Lisbon. And I think it will be very, very cool festival. Everybody's very excited with that. So hope to see you in Lisbon next July. Thank you so much,
All
Cam.
right. Thank you. Thank you.